The drums had not yet stopped when Abeni overheard the words that shattered the ground beneath her feet. "I will have a co-wife or there will be no wedding." Her heart clutched as if a viper had bitten it, her eyes locking on the man she had trusted. The hall buzzed with laughter and clinking goblets, oblivious to the storm erupting inside her. Betrayal had a scent, like burnt clay and bitter cola, and it filled her nostrils. Her hand trembled on the edge of the carved wooden chair as she whispered a question to the shadows. How could he demand this on our wedding day? Every soul in the village would celebrate, yet she felt the weight of chains tightening around her dignity. Silence stretched dangerously, broken only by the snare on his lips, a quiet accusation against her honor. Could she withstand the shame, the judgment, the suffocating tradition and still stand? Or would she crumble like the old mud walls of her father's courtyard? "Abeni, don't be foolish. A co-wife is tradition, a sign of wealth," he said, trying to mask his greed with the smoothness of custom. Her eyes flared, catching every flicker of shame he tried to hide. The women around him lowered their heads, whispering blessings, but their words struck her like knives. "Wealth without loyalty is poison," she spat. The silence that followed was heavier than the beating of drums. Her mother, seated with a trembling fan, looked torn between pride and despair. Her father's face had gone ashen, yet his eyes held a question. Should Abeni yield, as the women said, or would she carve her own path through the fire of disgrace? Every fiber of her being screamed for escape, yet the village watched, waiting, judging. Tradition and love clashed, and in that clash, Abeni realized the only path left was to break free, to cancel the wedding before her heart could be buried alive. With a calm sharper than the edge of a hunter's knife, Abeni stood. "I will not marry a man who seeks to share me as if I were a treasure chest," she declared. Gasps swept the hall like a sudden windstorm. Men and women froze, the drums faltering mid-beat. She felt the weight of centuries pressing down, yet a spark of something new glimmered within her, a courage that whispered, "This is the moment you forge your freedom." Her former fiance's face twisted from shock to rage, his fingers curling as if to grab her, but she had already stepped beyond the reach of fear. In that moment, the village saw not a bride, but a woman refusing to bow, refusing to accept humiliation. And as she walked away, the chatter rose into a storm of speculation, some calling her foolish, others whispering admiration. The first step into independence was terrifying, but Abeni felt the pulse of destiny beneath her feet, urging her forward. Alone beneath the shade of a towering Iroko tree, Abeni's tears fell quietly, absorbed by the earth that had witnessed generations of women bending beneath men's whims. She sat, chest heaving, mind racing with the question of survival. How would she reclaim her life when the village would brand her as a scandal, a woman discarded? Yet as she stared at the dry leaves swirling in the wind, an idea ignited. She remembered her skill with weaving, the intricate patterns her mother had taught her, patterns that told stories of courage and survival. If she could sell her textiles in the market, she could earn her own coin, stand on her own legs, and perhaps, just perhaps, rewrite the narrative of a woman's worth in her village. With a deep breath, she arose, the first seed of independence taking root in her heart, ready to challenge the weight of expectation and the venom of betrayal. The market was alive with the pungent smell of smoked fish, roasted maize, and ripe mangoes. Abeni set her hand-woven fabrics upon a wooden stall, their vibrant reds and indigos whispering stories of resilience. Passers-by glanced curiously, then lingered, drawn to the richness of her work. A merchant, impressed, offered her coin for a set of mats. Her fingers trembled with the thrill of exchange, the power of earning her own sustenance. Each transaction was a silent victory over the man who had tried to diminish her. Word spread, as it always did in small villages, that Abeni, the bride who had cancelled her wedding, now sold the most exquisite fabrics. Women came seeking her patterns, men seeking her advice on color and form. She felt a strange warmth blossom, not from love, but from the fierce pride of independence, a feeling her former fiancé could never give. This small stall under the unyielding sun was her battlefield, and each coin earned was a triumph over betrayal. One afternoon, as Abeni arranged a new display of her work, a stranger approached. He was unlike anyone she had seen in the village, wearing the dust of long travels upon his sandals. His eyes were calm, yet sharp, like a hawk scanning the plains. "Your work speaks louder than words," he said, kneeling slightly to examine her fabrics. Abeni felt an unusual pull in her chest, a fluttering of curiosity and caution. She knew the danger of hearts that moved too quickly, yet his presence was not a threat. It was a mirror, reflecting strength she had only just begun to understand. He lingered, asking questions about dyes, patterns, and the stories behind each weave. In his genuine interest, Abeni felt something she had not felt since the shattered wedding, the possibility of connection without compromise, a romance that would honor her independence rather than diminish it. Could this stranger become more than a visitor, a new chapter in her story, written on her terms? Days turned into weeks, and the stranger, whose name was Omari, became a regular presence at her stall. They spoke in whispers over fresh mats, shared tales of distant lands, and slowly built trust from fragments of conversation. Abeni's heart, once encased in fear and betrayal, began to thaw. She noticed the way Omari's eyes lingered on her hands, not with ownership, but admiration. Her independence did not frighten him, it intrigued her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he asked, "Do you ever wonder if destiny favors those who dare to walk alone?" Abeni smiled, her soul resonating with his words. She realized that the courage to call off a wedding had not only freed her body from chains, but also prepared her heart for a love that respected her, a love that would be a partnership rather than a demand. Their connection deepened, grounded in mutual respect and admiration, not societal expectation. The village, ever watchful, began to whisper about the new bond forming. Some gossiped, eyes narrowing with jealousy. Others admired Abeni's defiance. One morning, her former fiancé appeared at her stall, attempting to assert his dominance with a smirk. "So, you choose freedom over me," he sneered, trying to mask hurt with mockery. Abeni's eyes met his without flinching. "Freedom is not a choice, it is a birthright," she replied, her voice calm yet razor-sharp. Omari stood beside her, his presence a silent shield. The confrontation sparked murmurs among the onlookers, some in awe, others in disbelief. Abeni felt no fear, only clarity. The man who demanded a co-wife was no longer a threat. His power had been stripped by her courage. She realized then that independence was not just about survival, but about reclaiming respect, honor, and the right to determine her own story. Business flourished. Women from neighboring villages sought Abeni's fabrics, intrigued not only by the quality, but by the tale of the bride who dared to defy tradition. Each sale was a reaffirmation of her choice, each compliment a stitch mending the wounds of betrayal. Abeni began to hire apprentices, young girls who needed skills and income, teaching them the artistry her mother had passed down. She felt a new responsibility, not only to herself, but to the women around her, ensuring they too could find autonomy. Omari continued to visit, sometimes offering advice, sometimes simply walking silently beside her, letting her lead. Abeni understood that true love did not overshadow independence. It walked alongside it, honoring the steps taken alone. The village could talk, the gossip could swell, but Abeni's purpose had grown too large to be contained by whispers or judgment. One evening, as the market emptied, Abeni confronted the memory of the wedding hall, the shame, the betrayal. She closed her eyes and pictured the faces, the sneers, the judgment, and she laughed, a sound clear and unburdened. Omari, who had followed her thoughts like a gentle echo, asked softly, "Do you miss it?" She shook her head, the moonlight catching the determination in her eyes. "I mourned what I never truly lost," she said. "I grieved for a love that was not mine to claim, a life that would have been borrowed by fear." Omari's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, not as possession, but as promise. Abeni's laughter became a bridge to something deeper, the understanding that the greatest victories were not in revenge, but in self-realization and the pursuit of joy on one's own terms. Days blurred into nights as Abeni expanded her business, the market square becoming a tapestry of her ambition. Each stall bore the evidence of her resilience, bright cloths, hand-stitched stories, and the quiet hum of women learning to claim their own destinies. Yet even amidst triumph, whispers of the past reached her ears. Her former fiancé had spread tales, calling her reckless, claiming she had shamed the village. Abeni's lips pressed into a line. Shame was no longer hers to carry. Omari appeared then, standing behind her, silent but unwavering. "Do you hear them?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin, "and yet I remain unbroken." The realization washed over her. Independence was not just financial, it was armor. Every coin, every stitch, every word spoken in confidence built walls around her dignity. She no longer feared the judgment of men who could not understand the fire of a woman refusing to be shared, sold, or silenced. Omari's presence became a constant in her life, yet he did not claim her. Instead, he challenged her, questioned her choices, and celebrated her victories as if they were his own. One evening, while she dyed fabric by a river, he remarked, "Many would fear standing alone in the current of life. You do not." Abeni's eyes narrowed, reflecting the golden light of dusk. "I have seen the worst of submission," she said. "I have smelled betrayal at the altar, and it did not kill me. Why should fear now?" His admiration was silent but palpable. In his quiet presence, she found a mirror for her strength. The first lesson of her new romance was clear. The right partner does not demand, does not diminish. They reflect the power that already exists within. And yet, even with this understanding, she sensed that life had more trials ahead, as if the universe itself tested those who dared to forge freedom from the ashes of shame. Word of her independence spread beyond her village, reaching the ears of traders from distant lands. They came not for gossip, but for trade, offering exotic dyes, rare fabrics, and new ideas. Abeni stood among them, negotiating with the skill of a seasoned elder, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. Every deal she made was another layer of her reputation as a woman of influence, a woman who had turned betrayal into power. One night, a letter arrived sealed with an unfamiliar crest. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was a summons from a distant city, inviting her to showcase her textiles to nobility. Fear and excitement tangled within her, but she remembered the viper of betrayal at her cancelled wedding. That fear had not broken her, it had propelled her. Now an opportunity for glory presented itself, and she would not shrink. The same courage that led her to call off a wedding would carry her into new horizons, forging her legend beyond the village borders. The former fiancé, emboldened by rumors of her success, arrived one morning, his arrogance cloaked in civility. "Abeni, the market thrives, yes? But is it worth abandoning tradition?" he asked, eyes narrowing like a serpent preparing to strike. She met his gaze without flinching. "Tradition cannot cage a soul," she replied. Omari, standing slightly behind, radiated calm strength. The man faltered, seeing that his power no longer held sway. Abeni's voice rang clear across the bustling market. "I am not a prize to be won. I am not a possession to be shared. My life, my work, my heart, I claim all for myself." Gasps echoed, but so did whispers of admiration. The confrontation ended without violence, yet the power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. The man who had demanded a co-wife could no longer intimidate her. The woman who had faced betrayal had become a force, a legend in her own right, reshaping the very air of the market with every word she spoke. As Abeni's fame grew, she encountered new challenges. Rival traders sought to undercut her prices, villagers whispered jealousy-laced tales, and her former fiancé plotted petty revenge. Yet she met each obstacle with ingenuity. She introduced workshops for weaving, teaching apprentices to dye, stitch, and craft curtains infused with stories of courage. Each class was more than instruction. It was rebellion against the idea that women existed only to serve. Omari assisted, not as a master, but as a partner in thought and action. Their bond deepened through shared labor, mutual respect, and quiet, unspoken understanding. Abeni began to see that true independence was a web, not a solitary thread. It was woven with skills, allies, and the courage to act when others expected silence. And through every challenge, her heart, once shuttered by betrayal, began to bloom in the warmth of a love that did not demand surrender. One fateful evening, as the sun painted the sky with streaks of amber, a wealthy trader approached with an offer, a contract to supply textiles for the city's nobility. Abeni's pulse quickened. This was her chance to rise beyond the confines of the village, to transform her humble beginnings into legacy. Yet the contract came with risks, long travels, unfamiliar lands, and potential exposure to deceitful partners. Omari watched her weigh the decision, his presence steady and reassuring. "Do not let fear dictate your path," he said. She nodded, understanding that independence was not the absence of risk, but the courage to face it. Accepting the contract meant stepping fully into the life she had fought for, a life beyond betrayal, beyond constraint, beyond the narrow view of a village that once sought to define her. The path forward glimmered, dangerous yet intoxicating, like the call of a river rushing towards the sea. Preparations for the journey were meticulous. Abeni packed fabrics, dyes, and tools, ensuring nothing would hinder her independence. The villagers watched, a mix of admiration and skepticism in their eyes. Her former fiancé lingered at the edge of the crowd, unable to hide the sting of his diminished influence. As the caravan set forth, Abeni felt a thrill she had never known, liberation, movement, and purpose intertwining. The journey was arduous, sun-scorched plains, sudden storms, and nights filled with the cries of unseen creatures. Yet every challenge strengthened her resolve. Omari remained by her side, not as a shield, but as a companion in shared struggle. The bond between them matured, shaped by adversity, yet softened by trust and quiet laughter shared beneath star-strewn skies. Each step forward was a testament to her courage, each mile traveled a stitch in the fabric of her new destiny. Along the trade routes, Abeni discovered more than commerce. She encountered women who had faced oppression, young men and elders whose lives had been defined by fear. She taught them weaving, shared her story of defiance, and inspired others to claim their own paths. News of her arrival spread like wildfire. She became a legend whispered along dusty roads and bustling markets. Yet she remained cautious, knowing that fame often attracts envy and deceit. Omari noticed the burden she carried silently and offered solace in small gestures: a hand on the shoulder, a shared meal, a quiet word. Abeni began to understand that love and independence were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist as threads in the same tapestry, each strengthening the other. Her heart, once closed, now beat with purpose, courage, and a spark of joy she had never allowed herself before. In the distant city, Abeni's textiles captured the attention of nobles and merchants alike. Colors richer than the sunset, patterns infused with folklore, and a story of resilience behind every weave. Her work spoke louder than any words could. She negotiated contracts with confidence, earning not just wealth but respect. One evening, as she presented a new collection, a noble woman remarked, "Your hands craft freedom as much as fabric." Abeni smiled, realizing that the life she had carved out, born from betrayal and courage, now inspired admiration rather than judgment. Omari, standing silently beside her, squeezed her hand, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had endured together. Independence, she understood, was not merely survival. It was the power to transform pain into creation, rejection into recognition, and betrayal into the foundation of a life fully owned. Meanwhile, back in her home village, her former fiance's attempts at dominance continued to crumble. The villagers, once eager to gossip, now recounted Abeni's achievements with awe. The man who had demanded a co-wife became a cautionary tale whispered to young men. Power without respect is hollow. Abeni's victory was not violent, but absolute. She had turned shame into strength, betrayal into opportunity, and fear into freedom. And as she walked beside Omari through the city streets, the sun setting like molten gold over tiled roofs, she realized that the romance she had found was nothing like the one she had lost. It was better, built on equality, admiration, and unshakable respect. Her independence had not only saved her heart, but had led her to a love that celebrated rather than diminished the woman she had fought so fiercely to become. One night, as Abeni inspected her textiles in the glow of a lantern, a messenger arrived with urgent news. Her former fiancé had attempted to undermine her business by spreading lies to the city traders, claiming her fabrics were cursed. The venom in the words should have frightened her, but instead a fire ignited. She called her apprentices together, weaving a plan not of anger, but of clever justice. "We will show them the truth, not with swords, but with skill and integrity," she said. The city's traders, curious about the whispers of deceit, arrived the next day. Abeni presented her fabrics openly, letting their quality speak for itself. The lies unraveled like fragile threads in her hands. Omari stood beside her, pride and admiration shining in his eyes. Abeni realized that true justice is often quiet, persistent, and undeniable, and that betrayal, when met with courage and excellence, can return to those who sowed it. As the news spread, her former fiancé arrived in the city, face pale with shame, realizing too late that reputation and respect could not be bought or coerced. He attempted to confront her, voice trembling with anger masked as authority, yet the traders and nobles around him paid him no heed. Abeni did not raise her voice, did not curse him, but her eyes held the power of 1,000 storms. "You demanded I be shared, I chose to walk free. You demanded obedience, I demanded respect. See now where strength resides." The man stumbled backward, defeated by words, witness, and undeniable truth. The city murmured its approval, and Abeni understood that victory could be silent, unyielding, and profoundly satisfying. She had taken betrayal, molded it into independence, and delivered justice without a single strike. Omari's admiration deepened into something more intimate. One evening, beneath the soft glow of lanterns in the city courtyard, he spoke. "I have traveled far, but I have never met a spirit like yours, strong, unbroken, radiant." Abeni smiled, the weight of the past lifting further. She realized that love did not require surrendering her freedom, it amplified it. "And I have never met someone who honors my choices as you do," she whispered. Their hands met, fingers intertwining like vines climbing towards the sun. This was a romance built on equality, forged in trials, and tempered by respect. Abeni knew now that her independence was not a wall keeping love out, but a foundation upon which it could flourish. She felt joy, fierce and unashamed, for the first time in years. Days turned to weeks as the city embraced Abeni's work. She became a symbol of courage and enterprise, inspiring women who had been silenced, marginalized, or cheated of opportunity. She traveled from market to market, each transaction a lesson in autonomy and dignity. Along the way, she collected stories, weaving them into new patterns that depicted the triumph of women over betrayal, the strength found in walking alone, and the beauty of a love that lifts rather than confines. Omari accompanied her, not as a master or protector, but as a partner, a witness to her victories, and a quiet ally in the dance of independence. Together, they became legends, her hands shaping fabric, her heart shaping destiny, his presence a mirror to her courage. In her absence, the village had changed. The women whispered of Abeni's achievements, the men watched in awe, and even the elders began to question traditions that demanded obedience over dignity. Her former fiancé, now disgraced, returned home in silence, his pride shattered. The very chains he had hoped to forge around her instead had built a bridge to a new life he could no longer touch. Rumors of her success traveled faster than his attempts at control. Abeni's independence had not only restored her dignity, but had reshaped the moral compass of her village. The lesson was clear: strength, integrity, and courage were more powerful than wealth, deceit, or expectation. One evening, as she walked through the bustling city streets, a festival in full swing, Abeni reflected on her journey. Every stitch she had woven, every coin earned, every whispered insult overcome had led her to this place. She thought of the old wedding hall, the viper of betrayal, and the sting of humiliation, and she realized that the life she had carved, full of purpose, respect, and love, was worth every moment of fear and heartache. Omari, beside her, laughed softly at a vendor's playful banter, and she joined him, the sound light and unburdened. The journey of independence had brought not only prosperity, but the love she had always deserved, built not on tradition or expectation, but on shared admiration and trust. Suddenly, a wealthy noble approached her, offering a contract far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The sum promised could elevate her work to legendary status, allow her to open workshops across the lands, and create a lasting legacy for women. Abeni paused, considering not only the wealth, but the opportunity to empower countless others. Omari looked at her, eyes shining, knowing this was a moment she had earned entirely on her own. With a steady voice, she accepted. "We will create something that lasts, not just for us, but for those who come after, for those who need to know that freedom is possible." The city's lights reflected in her eyes, glimmering like a river of stars. Her former fiancé arrived once last, desperate, his pride shattered beyond repair. He tried to intimidate, tried to sway opinion, tried to reclaim control. Abeni faced him calmly, the strength of years of struggle, independence, and self-realization radiating from her. "I owe you nothing," she said, each word a blade of truth. "You attempted to bind me, but I broke free.
You tried to shame me, but I rose. You sought to define my worth, yet I have created it myself." The crowd, watching silently, whispered admiration. Omari placed his hand on hers, a silent vow of solidarity and respect. Justice had been served, not through violence, but through undeniable triumph, moral clarity, and unwavering self-determination. The festival that night became a celebration of more than trade. It was a celebration of courage, freedom, and the triumph of dignity over oppression. Abeni moved through the crowd, smiling at women who had learned from her example, men who had learned respect, and children whose eyes reflected hope for a future unburdened by fear.